인상도 너무 밝아지셨고 빨리 가고 싶다고 하시고 도복을 보면서 흐뭇해하시더라고요. 그때부터 어머니의 삶이 다시 시작이 된 것 같고 지팡이를 안 짚기 시작하셨어요. 그게 진짜 놀라운 변화인 것 같습니다.
어르신들이 운동을 통해서 노년을 건강한 생활을 할 수 있게끔 도와주는 게 바로 저는 태권도라고 생각이 듭니다.
Not only did Mother experience this change, but her fellow teammates also felt reborn due to the dramatic change in their lives.
너무 좋아요. 온 세상을 다 얻은 것 같죠. 제가 태권도 전도사가 된 것 같아요.
열정이 높으신 분이죠. 그 가족 전체가 태권도 가족입니다. 아주 화목하고 건강이 넘치는 대한민국의 대표적인 태권도 가족이 아닌가 싶습니다.
We're a family that loves practicing Taekwondo, so we've embarked on a new challenge.
사실 저희 가족들이 아픔이 정말 많습니다. 제가 아침에 일어났는데 반신이 마비가 왔었고 저희 아이는 태어나자마자 인공 심박기를 달았었고 정상으로도 살기 힘들다는 진단을 받았었지만 이 아이를 보면서 기적이라는 것을 알게 됐거든요. 그래서 태권도는 행복 그 자체입니다.
태권도를 해서 강해지니까 더 자신감이 올라가고 행복해요.
I believe Taekwondo is a blessing from heaven. It has made us hopeful for the future. Every day, we're excited to see what's in store for us tomorrow. Practice it with your family. Taekwondo brings happiness.
The Constitutional Court turned down the impeachment case against Prime Minister Han Duck-soo reinstating him some 3 months after he was suspended from duties while standing in for the president. Upon returning to his duties, Han underscored unity amid growing social division and vowed to deal with the current global trade war. Wildfires in Gyeongsang-do provinces have raged on for several days and spread to neighboring areas, wreaking havoc on villages on a massive scale. It's March 24th, 8 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. The opposition-led impeachment motion against Prime Minister Han Duck-soo was dismissed by the court in a split decision. All eyes are now on what's to come next. Our correspondent Uiseong stirs us off.
The Constitutional Court has ruled against the impeachment of Prime Minister Han Duck-soo, effectively restoring him to his duties. The judicial bench delivered its ruling Monday, 87 days after the National Assembly passed a motion to remove Han from power, who is also acting president, following President Uiseong's own suspension from office after declaring martial law. Out of the 8 justices, 5 voted to dismiss the impeachment motion, saying there were no grounds to justify Han's removal from office. Only one Justice Chung Kye-sun voted to uphold the Prime Minister's impeachment. 2 justices, meanwhile, argued the impeachment case itself should be scrapped without review, as the National Assembly passed the impeachment motion with a simple majority, instead of a 2/3 majority required to remove a president. Among the 5 grounds for impeachment, the most contentious point had been the Prime Minister's refusal to appoint 3 Constitutional Court justices recommended by the opposition-led National Assembly. The bench ruled that while Han's decision to withhold the appointment violated the Constitution and the law, this did not necessarily betray public trust. One justice said the PM does not have an immediate obligation to appoint the candidates. On the National Assembly's accusation that Han abetted President Yoon in his December 3rd martial law declaration, the bench said there was no evidence to suggest that. It also did not recognise the Assembly's claim that the PM tried to establish a joint governance system with former ruling People Power Party leader Han Dong-un, nor the PM's alleged push for vetoing controversial bills on special investigations. With his near 3-month suspension behind him, Han expressed his gratitude to the Constitutional Court for its, quote, wise decision.
Upon my return, I will dedicate myself fully, always upholding the Constitution and the law, to working hand in hand with our people, the political community, the media, civic organizations, businesses, government officials, and cabinet members for the sake of our younger generations and the future of Korea.
The presidential office expressed its support for the ruling as a starting point for normalizing governance, saying the National Assembly's abuse of its impeachment power was shown to be a malicious political offensive. Out of the 13 impeachment motions passed by the National Assembly in recent months, the court has ruled on and dismissed 9 cases. Ahead of the president's own impeachment verdict, observers say the justices' divergent views on Han Duck-soo's impeachment are worth noting. The bench has been deliberating on Yoon's case for a month after his final trial hearing. His ruling is expected this Friday at the earliest, or before mid-April when 2 justices retire from the bench. For now, Han's return to office marks a critical turning point. But with President Yoon Suk-yeol's fate still undecided, the nation's political uncertainty is far from over. Uiseong, Arirang News.
Returning to his post as acting president, Han first pledged to steer the country out of challenges amid growing social division and the global trade war. Our political correspondent Kim Do-yeon reports.
In an address to the nation after 88 days in suspension, acting President and Prime Minister Han Duck-soo on Monday emphasized national unity. He especially called for politicians to work together amid multiple crises.
If there's one clear lesson we've learned over the past few years, it's that a society divided by extremes leads only to misery and fulfills the dreams of no one. The ruling and opposition parties, as well as the government, must truly change, and I will start with myself.
He also noted that During the 50 years he's spent in public service, the majority of the people in South Korea have wanted to make the country go up and forward, not left or right. As for his return as a caretaker, he said during his suspension he thought deeply about what his last responsibilities would be if he were to return. He pointed out the global trade war started by U.S. President Donald Trump and said the world is currently facing an intensifying U.S.-China power rivalry following the inauguration of President Trump, along with a new wave of geopolitical shifts and the restructuring of the global economic order.
I will devote all my wisdom and capabilities to safeguarding our national interests in the trade war that has already become a reality. For the remainder of my term, every decision I make will be guided by what best serves Korea's industries and future generations. The entire cabinet will move forward alongside me.
Han was immediately briefed about the ongoing devastating wildfires in the southeast of the country. He also made orders to public safety officials amid the turbulent times. For his first lunch back, he ate with cabinet members. There, he urged ministers to push forward on key issues directly tied to people's livelihoods with greater speed. And he asked all cabinet members and public officials across the country to do their utmost to ensure that every aspect of state affairs, including diplomacy, national security, the economy, trade, public safety, and administration, functions smoothly. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Following the court's decision, rival political parties showed different responses. Our National Assembly correspondent Shin Ha-young has the details.
The Constitutional Court's ruling on Prime Minister Han Duck-soo's impeachment has brought mixed reactions from the rival parties. The ruling People Power Party welcomed the court's decision to dismiss Han's impeachment, saying it was expected and describing the ruling as a warning against the opposition party's use of impeachment legislation.
It was a strong warning from the court against the opposition party's reckless legislation. It has lost all 9 cases, a historic defeat.
The party floor leader Kwon Sung-dong, however, expressed deep regret over the court's decision to set the required votes for passing an impeachment motion against an acting president at 151 seats. The PPP has been arguing that Han's impeachment should be treated like a presidential impeachment, which requires the support of 2/3 of lawmakers or 200 votes out of 300. Kwon argued that this effectively allows unlimited impeachment motions against acting presidents, calling it a dangerous precedent. The PPP said on Monday that lawmakers have proposed an amendment to the National Assembly Act to prevent abuse of impeachment rules in the future. The party's policy chief Kim Sang-un said that the bill would require lawmakers or parties that initiate an impeachment motion to cover the procedural costs if the Constitutional Court dismisses or rejects the case. The main opposition Democratic Party, which was at the forefront of the opposition-led push in the National Assembly to remove Han from office, expressed regret over the ruling.
We have to respect the decision, but I wonder if the public will accept why this clear and deliberate violation of the constitutional duty to form a constitutional body wasn't enough for impeachment.
DP floor leader Park Chan-dae also emphasized that the court confirmed it was unconstitutional not to appoint justice nominees, urging Prime Minister Han, who also resumed his role as the acting president, to appoint justice nominee Ma Eun-hyuk immediately. Park also urged the court to deliver a verdict on President Yoon's impeachment as early as Tuesday. Meanwhile, National Assembly Speaker Won-sik said he respects the court's decision, stating it resolves constitutional interpretation issues regarding the required vote to pass an impeachment motion against an acting president. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
Moving on, the wildfires in Gyeongsang-buk-do province have now entered their 3rd day. Despite major firefighting efforts, strong winds continue to spread the flames, making the difficult situation even worse. Hundreds of residents have been forced to evacuate. Kim Jong-sil has the latest.
The wildfires in Uiseong County, Gyeongsang-buk-do Province are now in their third day. The flames have spread to neighboring Andong City, prompting evacuation orders as strong winds worsen the situation. The containment rate has dropped from 71% at noon on Monday to just 65% by 3 p.m. Wind gusts reaching over 125 kilometers per hour have worsened the situation as the flames spread rapidly. As of Monday afternoon, over 110 buildings, including homes and warehouses, have been destroyed in Uiseong, along with 90 hectares of crops. More than 1,700 evacuees have sought shelter in local facilities, with the number expected to rise. Firefighting helicopters are working continuously, but with stronger winds and nightfall approaching, containment remains a challenge. On the day of his reinstatement, acting President and Prime Minister Han Duck-soo visited the Wildfire Command Center and shelters in Uiseong to support displaced residents. He stressed the importance of protecting firefighting personnel and ensuring aid for affected communities, including housing and financial assistance. At least 27 locations nationwide are being affected by simultaneous wildfires that broke out over the weekend. 4 firefighting personnel have lost their lives while battling the flames in southern Gyeongsang-namdo Province. Officials are urging residents to stay informed and evacuate when instructed. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
Foreign Minister Jo Tae-yeol was in Tokyo this past weekend for trilateral talks with his Japanese and Chinese counterparts, aimed at advancing partnership on security matters, including North Korea's nuclear ambitions. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Yoon-ji covers the latest diplomatic endeavor.
South Korea's Foreign Minister Jo Tae-yeol sat down for talks with his Japanese and Chinese counterparts in Tokyo as the 3 countries seek to boost cooperation for regional peace amid geopolitical uncertainties. This is the first time that they've met since November 2023. In a press conference following the meeting that took place in Tokyo on Saturday, Jo said that they've agreed that it's in the 3 countries' common interest to maintain security on the Korean Peninsula. He also added that they addressed the issue of illegal cooperation between Pyongyang and Moscow.
I stress that illegal military cooperation between Russia and North Korea must come to an end immediately, and that the North should not be rewarded for its wrongdoings in the course of ending the war in Ukraine.
Japanese Foreign Minister Takeshi Iwaya noted that the world is at a turning point in history and showed concerns about evolving threats from North Korea.
Regarding the current international situation, I expressed my concerns about North Korea's nuclear and missile development, cryptocurrency thefts, and cooperation with Russia as regional threats.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi described the current situation on the Korean Peninsula as complex and sensitive, while adding that all parties must meet each other halfway and show goodwill. On economic issues, he said the 3 countries are looking to push forward with regional economic integration, including the resumption of a free trade agreement.
The 3 parties are maintaining communication on restarting the negotiations on the free trade agreement and strive to resume them as soon as possible.
The 3 officials also agreed to speed up efforts to hold a summit between their leaders as soon as possible at a mutually convenient date. Bae Yoon-ji, Arirang News.
Over in Riyadh, officials from Washington are to hold talks with delegates from Kyiv and Moscow for the U.S.-mediated partial ceasefire. Talks between Ukraine and the U.S. took place earlier than expected. Meantime, Russia and Ukraine continue to exchange attacks. Cha Yoon-kyung has the latest.
A day before the U.S. plans to hold separate meetings with Ukrainian and Russian delegates on Monday, Washington's technical team held talks with Ukrainian officials on Sunday in Riyadh. As part of Washington's shuttle diplomacy in Saudi Arabia, U.S. and Ukrainian officials were set to hold talks on Monday, followed by a separate meeting between U.S. and Russian delegates on the same day. However, it was confirmed by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky that Washington and Kyiv would hold the talks a day earlier. Following Sunday's meeting, Ukrainian Defense Minister Rustem Umerov said talks with U.S. officials were productive and focused, adding that the two sides addressed key points including energy. U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East Steve Witkoff expressed confidence that progress would be made with Russia and Ukraine. Speaking to Fox News on Sunday, Witkoff said he expects Ukraine and Russia to make progress on a ceasefire in the Black Sea after holding talks on Monday, which will naturally gravitate to a full-on shooting ceasefire. However, the Kremlin downplayed expectations of a rapid resolution on Sunday, saying talks were just beginning. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said in an interview that there are difficult negotiations ahead. U.S. and Russian officials began talks in Saudi Arabia on Monday to make progress towards a broad ceasefire in Ukraine, especially for a Black Sea maritime ceasefire deal. On the other hand, Russia continued attacks on Ukraine overnight, with Ukraine saying Russia launched 99 attack drones, killing at least 3 people, including a 5-year-old child. Cha Yoon-kyung, Arirang News.
Back on the local fronts, we shed light on a tour here in capital Seoul that offers you the chance to join a trek that traces Korea's fight for independence. Our Kim Bo-kyung was there.
Thousands of enthusiastic trekkers began walking along the trail that starts at Baekbom Square on Namsan Mountain in Seoul. They headed along one of the Korean Memorial Roads, national pilgrimage trails covering Korea's key historic sites. The Patriots Ministry launched this meaningful trail over the weekend to commemorate the 80th anniversary of Korea's liberation this year.
South Korea's proud history has come this far after going through many hardships and challenges. The Patriots Ministry tries to remember this through cultural events such as trekking and camping.
There are 3 courses in Seoul related to the country's independence. One that goes around the Jongno area, taking Tapgol Park, where the Declaration of Independence was read on March 1st, 1919. A second route around the Seodaemun area, where trekkers can visit the Prison History Hall, where martyrs were imprisoned during the Japanese colonial era. And last but not least, the route around Namsan Mountain, where people can visit the March 1st Independence Movement Monument. Not being a competition, participants slowly walked along the trail, enjoying the scent of the newly arrived spring. The focus is not on speed, but on appreciating our ancestors' unwielding wish for independence.
By walking along the trail, tracing historic sites of the independence movement, people will be able to reflect on the courage and sacrifices made for the country's freedom.
I think this is a meaningful event because it lets people think about Korean history, which is easy to forget once more.
More Korea Memorial Road routes are to be announced nationwide. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Time now to take a look at what's been happening in the world of sports. Joining us in the studio is our sports editor, Paul Neat. Hello, Paul.
Hello.
Let us start with baseball. The new KBO season got underway over the weekend.
Yes, and it began with all 5 opening day games on Saturday being sellouts. A total of 109,950 fans were in attendance. This is the 2nd highest for an opening day and the 3rd highest for a single KBO match day. Then Sunday saw 5 more sellouts, the first time the opening series has completely sold out. And in doing so, the KBO set a new opening weekend attendance record of 219,900. The previous record was just over 214,000, set in 2019. Last season, the KBO achieved over 10 million fans for the very first time, with the league growing in popularity. But it wasn't all good news over the weekend, as reigning MVP Kim Do-young of the Kia Tigers injured his hamstring and will be out for a short while. But the Tigers said on Sunday that it is the mildest form of a muscle injury.
Moving on to football, the South Korean national team is back in action on Tuesday night against Jordan.
Yes, it's the second of 2 World Cup qualification matches in March. The 1-1 draw with Oman on Thursday means that South Korea's path to the World Cup isn't as straightforward as it was this time last week. A win plus Iraq either losing or drawing in their game with Palestine could mean that South Korea can qualify early, as Iraq in 3rd play Jordan in 2nd in their last game. But Palestine are ranked bottom of the group, so South Korea might have to wait until the next international break in June to book their place at the 2026 World Cup. The 1-1 draw was described by manager Han Duck-soo as the worst display in this round of qualification. He said his players gave the ball away too easily and his team never seemed in control. He'll be expecting a better performance against Jordan on Tuesday in Suwon.
But I understand that there will be a few key players out injured.
Yes, what could have gone wrong did go wrong on Thursday. Midfielders Lee Gang-in and Paek Sung-ho, as well as defender Jung Sung-hyun, have reportedly left the squad through injury. The latter picked up a knock in the lead-up to the Oman game in training. Paek Sung-ho, who started the game, went off injured in the first half. Lee Gang-in came on in the second half, with Korea looking to find another goal, but went down injured in the build-up to Oman's equaliser. Feyenoord midfielder Hwang In-bum could return, though, and has been seen back in training, but there will be no replacements called up. Manager Han Duck-soo has already been impacted by the injury to Kim Min-jae before a ball was even kicked. There are 3 games left now, including the game on Tuesday. Korea are top of Group B, 3 points clear of both Iraq and Jordan. The top 2 will seal places in the World Cup.
Fingers crossed. Thank you for the wrap-up.
Thank you.
Currently, the highest level of forest fire crisis warning, severe level, is in effect in the southern regions. In addition, the dry weather warnings have also been expanded and strengthened. With gusty winds blowing, it is very important to take extra precautions to prevent wildfires. Meanwhile, the air stays dusty across the country. Due to the additional yellow dust, the concentration of ultrafine dust tomorrow will stay at bad levels nationwide. Please wear a protective mask when you go outside. Tomorrow morning will start warmly across the country, with Gwangju and Daegu at 9 degrees Celsius, Busan at 11 degrees. Highs will jump to 20 degrees in Seoul and Chuncheon, 24 degrees in Daejeon and Gwangju. Rain is expected on Wednesday on Jeju Island and the south coast, and it will spread across the country by Thursday. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session up next.
How to survive in Korea. Weddings. Step 0. Attire. As a guest, dress formal to business casual. Avoid wearing all white, shorts or going topless. Step 1. Arrival time. Arrive 30 minutes prior to the wedding ceremony. Too many cars, too many halls, too many people. There are many twists and turns. Take pictures and shake hands. And write your name vertically, not horizontally, in the guest book. Step 2. Or, shibor. 50,000 won, 100,000 won, 150,000 won. Cash gifts are given in these units. Decide on the amount based on your relationship. Write your name vertically on the envelope. Step 3. Wedding etiquette. Fill up the front row. Guests have 3 duties to fulfill: clapping, cheering, and taking pictures. Step 4. Dining. Take off your jacket. This will be your seat from now on. Start with the not your everyday delicacies. Galbijjim. Yes. Bosa. Yes. Chili shrimps. Definitely yes. Kimbap. Yeah. Only if you can't live without it. No need to pile up food. You have more than one opportunity. Did you survive the wedding? Wait. Did someone catch your eye? What are you waiting for? You're looking fine today.
Capturing your day starts new day at Arirang.
A global conversation through the unique lens of millennials and Gen Zs. News Generation.
From politics to culture, delivering news from home and abroad. The Daily Report. A profound analysis of Korea by members of the media. Press Perspective.
A distinct perspective and a broader view. Newscenter.
A compelling discussion spotlighting domestic and international affairs within the frame.
Opening new vistas through a window of truth, connecting Korea and the world. Your pick, Arirang News.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gen. South Korea's Constitutional Court rejected the National Assembly's impeachment of Prime Minister Han Duck-soo today, clearing him of charges related to the controversial martial law plan and judicial appointment delays. The ruling, 5 votes to dismiss, 1 to uphold, and 2 to reject on procedural grounds, comes 3 months after Han was impeached for allegedly aiding President Yoon's December 3rd martial law declaration. Now, with the decision, Han was immediately reinstated as acting president and returned to government affairs without delay. But the implications may stretch far beyond Han himself. Legal experts and political observers are closely watching how this verdict could shape the Constitutional Court's approach to President Yoon's impeachment trial. To help us understand the legal and political impact of this ruling, we invite attorney An Jun-sung into the studio. Welcome.
Thank you.
And also joining us online is Lee Hyun, Dean and Professor of Law at Handong International Law School. Great to see you, Professor.
Always a pleasure to be on the program.
So let's start right away with attorney An. So this morning, like I've said, the court dismissed the National Assembly's impeachment motion on Prime Minister Han Duck-soo. Of the 8 justices, 5 voted to dismiss, 1 to uphold, and 2 rejected the motion on procedural grounds. Could you tell us what's your interpretation of today's ruling?
First of all, it was a very weak case from the beginning. It's interesting, setting aside the factual allegation on both sides. It was pretty clear shot for the KCC to make a decision. For example, that the cases had only 1 hearing, which took 90 minutes. Which, considering the political and legal significance of this impeachment case, is way too short. So I guess from the beginning, I think the cases take it very well. It's a very simple case for them to make decision. It's clear shot. That's why they came up with basically 7-1 decision today. And in respect of his impeachment trial, there was 5 issues, and then 3 issues were related to his role of the prime minister. And 2 issues were related to his role of acting president. So in respect of the first 3 issues, right? Basically, the court is saying that the veto power, well, only the president has the veto power. Do not share with any other prime minister, basically. So that's the main point of their statement today, and also about the. About the special prosecutor appointment issues, that basically there was a literal there's expressions like there's without hesitation, means that it's allowing the reasonable delay. So it doesn't mean that it's not immediately per se. So unless otherwise it's defined by otherwise in the provision saying that without delay means that reasonable delay is acceptable, and court looked at it as 10-day delay was reasonable under the circumstances, and therefore there was no violation of the law or constitutional law. Or lastly, they talk about the KCC appointment of the justice appointment issue. He rejected it. There's only one ground that court that agree with the National Assembly argument, saying that it's the violation of constitutional law. However, it was not serious enough to impeach him from the post. I think that's the ruling today.
Right. Thank you for summarizing the whole grasp of today's ruling for us. Now to Professor Lee. So one of the issues at the time of the impeachment motion against Prime Minister Han was whether the National Assembly has met the required quorum as well. Han's side argued that since he was serving as acting president, the quorum for impeaching a president, not a cabinet member, should have been applied. But 6 justices concluded that there were no procedural issues. Could you explain for us the reasoning behind this?
Right. As you noted, with respect to the issue of what was necessary for the impeachment to actually go forward was basically found in the Constitution. This is Article 65. And Article 65 of the Constitution provides that in cases of impeachment for the president, you need at least 200 members to vote in favor, which would then pass the resolution. But for the other officials, so the prime minister as well as other cabinet officials, if you want to impeach those officials, you need 151. So you need a simple majority of the National Assembly members to vote in favor. So the real question here was, did you consider, or does the impeachment motion needs to consider the prime minister's role as acting president? So therefore, should that 200 threshold be met for the impeachment, or do you consider him still to be the prime minister even though he's acting president? And so that was really the crux of the issue as to whether or not you would treat him as president essentially, and therefore you would have to meet that 200 vote threshold. But as the court noted, basically, the 6 justices that basically indicated that procedural threshold was met because, in terms of his role as acting president, he still is the prime minister, despite his fact that he was appointed, given the circumstances under the Constitution, to be the acting president. So what the court decided in this case was not to look to his role as acting president, but to his original position as prime minister. And so I think what the court is doing here is preserving the integrity of his appointment as prime minister, and that is the way he should be treated. Although there were 2 justices that voted against this and said basically, we have to sort of look at this in terms of his role as acting president, and he should be treated as the president because he has the powers of the presidency in his role as acting president. So there was some dispute, and naturally, depending on your, which side of the political aisle you stood on, obviously the ruling party would say, the president, of course, and acting president should be treated the same, and therefore should meet the same requirements as President Yoon with respect to his impeachment. But the Constitutional Court disagreed, and so essentially what you're having here is keeping the role of the prime minister and assessing that his status as prime minister should be controlling in this case, and that's essentially what the Constitutional Court did.
Right, so the court seemed to have drawn a clear line on that. Now, another thing to note during today's trial is the National Assembly's argument that Han should be removed from office for allegedly conspiring or giving consent to Yoon to declare martial law. But yet, not only the 5 justices who voted for dismiss, but also the one who supported the impeachment, Justice Chung Kye-sun, concluded that there was no violation of the Constitution. Could you tell us the reasoning behind this?
Well, this is a very simple case, actually, from the legal perspective, because this is about the allegedly the prime minister was conspiring with the president on the martial law declaration. But look at it here. By definition, conspiracy is basically an agreement between 2 or more persons to commit a crime. And where is the agreement, right? The first element, the prime element is the agreement between the party. Here, the Prime Minister Han Duck-soo and President Uiseong. And from the beginning, I think the Prime Minister was making arguments saying that he didn't know until the last minute. And then later he found out the fact that he tried to declare the martial law. He said he did his best to prevent him, persuaded not to do it, but he couldn't stop it. And from the legal court perspective, should they do something against any, the officials who couldn't persuade someone from doing something illegal? And well, he shouldn't use the, some physical power, anything, any exercise and power, anything, right? So basically, I think the court looking at from perspective that he did it best under the circumstances, and he didn't really violate any law. I think that's very important. And means also, from their perspective, the court found that basically means that there was insufficient evidence to prove that there was the agreement between the Prime Minister Han Duck-soo and the President Yoon and to declare the martial law from the beginning. So I guess that's more important. And however, from the other side, President Yoon's perspective is not really good. It's not bright future for him as well, because that conspiring with Prime Minister is not necessarily means that conspiring with someone else. So he could still have some problem with someone else in conspiracy charges, and likewise. So the court didn't really find there's a sufficient evidence to prove there's agreement or causation between the 2-party prime minister and president, but does not necessarily mean that there was no connection with someone else.
So we'll have to get closely watch on that front as well. But regarding President Yoon's martial law declaration, the court did not make any legal or constitutional judgment on a December 3rd martial law proposal itself, and which is an issue that could influence, the impeachment case against President Yoon. Professor Lee, how should we interpret the court's silence on this point?
Well, I think everyone who was watching this decision for Prime Minister was trying to get some indication as to how the court would then decide President Yoon's fate. And as Attorney Han pointed out, this was a relatively straightforward case. The fact that the Constitutional Court didn't spend a lot of time on Prime Minister Han's sort of impeachment case, I think, is telling, because the National Assembly that brought this case really didn't have much to sort of ground its impeachment on the Prime Minister. And so, the essential question here with respect to the Prime Minister, as Attorney Han pointed out, was basically, did he somehow aid the president in declaring martial law? And so, the constitutionality of martial law itself really was not at issue when it comes to Prime Minister Han's case. And so basically, the Constitutional Court didn't need to address that question in deciding the issue. Now, some people, of course, are surmising that, because there's a lack of consensus among the justices with respect to President Yoon, that basically that's not the reason why, the legality or illegality of martial law itself was not addressed. But, essentially, again, it was not relevant to the question that was posed to the court as to the grounds for impeachment for the Prime Minister. And so, again, the essential question there was, did he have any role in the declaration of martial law? And basically, it was a question of whether or not you believe the Prime Minister, as well as the other evidence that was presented, that he, had some role in the approval of the martial law declaration. So, at the end, basically, the court didn't have to address the question itself. And, naturally, the court is not going to involve itself in an issue that necessarily doesn't have to decide. But I think a lot of people were maybe disappointed in maybe trying to get some hint as to what the court would decide eventually with respect to President Yoon. So I think that's really what the court did, because it was really not an issue with respect to whether or not the martial law itself was unconstitutional or not, because it was not an issue.
Right, and we still have to wait for that ruling in the coming days. Now, despite the situation, though, many people still believe that today's ruling could still influence President Yoon's impeachment trial, though they're, legally separate cases, but they're both on impeachment. Attorney Han, do you think today's ruling might offer some positive clues about the outcome of Yoon's impeachment trial?
Well, actually, as Professor Lee pointed out correctly, it's really this case, the Prime Minister's case, was not really talking about the illegality of the martial law declaration itself. So the court really didn't talk about anything. So we still have open shot on that really major issue on whether that's legal or illegal to declare martial law at the time under the circumstances on December 3rd. This is really critical question we ask, and then the approval can check actual complaint made by the National Assembly on the impeachment trial. And basically it's mainly focused on the declaration of martial law procedurally and substantively, whether it's consistent with the Korean constitutional law. So I think that one of the things the court were looking at, maybe they're looking at focus on procedural matter, which the court did not talk about today, because that didn't talk about the illegality of the martial law declaration, because it was not really relevant to the case, this Prime Minister impeachment case at the point. So, however, I think that the court will focus on procedural things first, because that if you really talk. There's a process here, logical timeline. So if there's some problem, flaw on the procedural matter, they don't even have to talk about it. So basically, I think the best idea they come up with, if they can agree, if the 8 justices come to agree on the procedural issues, that, well, there was insufficiency or there was some illegality on the or insufficiency of the procedure problem, they don't have to even discuss the other further issues. So I think that's a very clever idea, but I don't know whether they can actually achieve that idea. But if they cannot agree on that procedural issue, if we go with the substantive law issue, it might be very complicated to get consensus among the 8 justices.
Right, so we'll have to wait and see until that. So with this dismissal of this motion, Prime Minister Han returned to his post today as acting president after 87 days rather, and the opposition is now expected to ramp up pressure to appoint Ma Eun-hyuk, especially since the court previously ruled that the refusal to appoint Ma was unconstitutional. Professor Lee, do you think Ma would be appointed, and could this become a late-stage variable in Yoon's impeachment trial?
I don't think there's any rush for the Prime Minister to actually appoint Judge Ma to be on the court, even though the National Assembly at the time, submitted his name for nomination for appointment by, then acting President Cheng Sang-mok. But, in this case, this case had actually appeared before the Constitutional Court before in terms of whether or not, then acting President Cheng had a duty to appoint, Judge Ma to be on the court. But if we recall, the decision of the Constitutional Court at the time was that basically that there was a duty for the acting president to make the appointment, given that fact that the National Assembly forwarded his name for appointment by the president. But that the Constitutional Court itself decided that it could not compel the acting president to actually go forward with the appointment because, the difficulty here for the court was it could certainly declare the constitutionality or unconstitutionality of the issue of the appointment, but couldn't itself order the appointment of the justice to its own bench. And so, the court itself is very limited in that regard because it doesn't have the authority to appoint. So the court found itself in a very difficult position because while it said that the acting president had the duty to appoint, it itself could not make that decision and appoint because that's beyond the scope of its power. So the Prime Minister, if that's the precedent then, this is a question, really is a political question because the court has already ruled about its constitutionality that there should be an appointment. But again, if the Prime Minister decides not to appoint, the question then becomes a political question. So I don't think at this point there's any rush on the Prime Minister's part to go about with the appointment, particularly obviously now we have the impending impeachment decision by the court with President Yoon. But even if Judge Ma was appointed, Judge Ma would not take part in any decision making with respect to the actual impeachment. But I think the time is ticking, of course, because we all know that there are two justices on the court that are going to retire. And so I think that is certainly on everyone's mind is that this has to be done before April. And then if Justice Ma is going to be appointed, that's going to, obviously another variable added to this question about the judgment itself. So, but I don't, again, in conclusion, there's no rush for the Prime Minister to make that appointment.
Mm-hmm. Now, this latest ruling on Prime Minister Han marks Constitutional Court's first judicial decision involving a senior official over the martial law. Initially, the court said President Yoon's case would take precedence over others, but Han's case came first. How do you read behind this?
It's a very interesting question because the KCC didn't say we're going to do it first. President first came first, because they basically means that they prioritize the process, so they make it faster. Doesn't necessarily means that we'll do the first, President first. And other thing, I think it really depends on which side you are. And if you try to looking at the bright side, bright future, if you are with the president side, we're looking at that since we have a nine dismissal case of the impeachment cases. That's a great victory case, and they're hoping for better future. So 10 dismissal straight. And if you're the other side, we're looking at that's the really perhaps the KCC taking political decisions, saying that before getting dismissal case, actually get try to avoid any political instability. Perhaps by political vacuum, because the president was removed. If he removed, maybe the prime minister have to keep in position already and prepare for the political vacuum. So I guess that might be, depends on your side. If you try looking at bright side, there's a very, very interesting story that can come of it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Now, there are a lot of speculations about President Yoon Suk-yeol's final ruling on when it would actually happen. Professor Lee, some predict that it could come by the end of this week. Some say it would go by next week. Why do you think it's taking too long? And when do you expect the ruling to be announced?
Well, I think it's certainly possible. I think a lot of people are watching this Friday, right, to be the date which the court will then come out with its ruling on the President Yoon's impeachment, and that's because you have, again, as I mentioned before, the impending retirements of 2 justices in April, and so the way the court works typically, and this is with respect to its normal process of decision making, is usually the last, on the 27th of March, which is this Thursday, it will come out with its regularly monthly rulings on cases, and particularly because there are 2 justices that are going to retire, this is the last opportunity for the regular cases, not the impeachment cases, but the other court cases before the court, that before justices retire, they will make a final ruling on those kinds of regular constitutional law questions. But because the impeachment is such a high priority, the question is, given, the potential issues that among the justices themselves about what the decision will be, the 28th seems to be likely. But again, if the court hasn't really ironed out its decision, literally meaning that if the court hasn't really come to a consensus, or they're still writing their opinions, because again, the court could dismiss, there could be a vote in favor or against, and then justices will have an opportunity to comment and write their own opinions, either concurring or dissenting opinions based on the actual outcome of the case. And so what I suspect is happening is a lot of discussion is happening among the justices right now as to what the decision will be, and they're trying to iron out maybe the actual outcome in terms of the actual votes. And then depending on whether you're a dissenting judge or part of the majority, then you're going to write your decision. And so it may be that if the decision doesn't come out this week, it's partly because the justices are still really working out the reasoning of the decisions. And if that happens, I think what we're going to see probably is this may go into April, but certainly before the time the 2 justices have to retire, which is sometime in mid to late April. So I think at the latest, you're going to see early April to mid-April if the fact the decision actually comes out. So I think in the sort of conclusion basically to all of this is, right, people are expecting hopefully the 28th to be the day the court comes out with its decision. But again, there's no precedent for all of these major decisions to come out in 1 week. And so the court may be taking its time, maybe because the complicated nature of this case, or maybe because there really isn't any consensus that the court has achieved at this point. But obviously only time will tell, and we'll see very soon within the next couple of weeks how the court actually decides. And so obviously the whole country will be waiting with bated breath as to what the court actually decides.
Right. So there's growing speculation about a verdict this week, but the lack of a set date still leaves room for further delays up to mid-April. Gentlemen, we will have to conclude our discussion right here, though. Thank you so much for your insights, Attorney An.
Thank you.
And Professor Lee, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.
How to survive in Korea. Cafes. Step 1. Find a seat.